You know what's interesting about the 2011 NBA draft? Everyone talks about the players teams passed on. Kawhi Leonard, Klay Thompson, Jimmy Butler, Nikola Vucevic, and because of how their careers turned out, people act like the top of the draft was obvious. It wasn't. After Kyrie Irving went first overall, there wasn't a clear consensus on who should go next. Two names were consistently at the center of that conversation, though: Derrick Williams and Enes Kanter. Neither became the franchise cornerstone their teams envisioned, but both were respected prospects, and both had legitimate reasons to be drafted where they were. Let's start with Derrick Williams. Coming out of Arizona, Williams had one of the best sophomore seasons in college basketball. He averaged just under 20 points and over 8 rebounds while shooting nearly 60% from the field and better than 56% from 3. Even though it was on a low volume, he showed great touch from beyond the arc and showed that he does have great potential entering the next level. The 3-point percentage jumps off the page, but scouts weren't simply chasing a hot shooting season. What they liked was how naturally his offensive game had developed. He could score with his back to the basket, attack closeouts, run the floor, finish above the rim, and he had soft touch around the basket. His free throw shooting also suggested his jumper had a chance to translate. Then came the NCAA tournament. Against Duke in the Sweet 16, Williams looked every bit like a future NBA star. 25 points, 12 rebounds, 4 made threes. He was the best player on the floor against one of the country's best teams. And performances like that only strengthened what scouts already believed. Physically, there was a lot to like. At around 6'8" and 240 pounds, he was explosive, strong, and played with tremendous power. He could beat bigger defenders down the floor and simply overpower smaller ones. That combination made him one of the safest bets near the top of the draft. But even then, there was one question that never completely went away. What position was he? That became the biggest debate surrounding Derrick Williams. If he played power forward, did he have enough size and length to defend bigger NBA fours every night? If he played small forward, was his handle and perimeter game polished enough to create offense against quicker defenders? It wasn't viewed as a fatal flaw, but it turned out to be a fatal flaw. Derrick Williams never found his position in the NBA. He struggled defensively. He was someone that a lot of people overrated his 3-point shooting coming into the league. That wasn't a big time strength of his. He wasn't able to create off the dribble, but it was simply the biggest question and an otherwise impressive valuation when it came, that being his biggest flaw of what is his position. Minnesota believed his athleticism and offensive versatility would allow him to figure it out, though. The fit made sense on paper during the time also. Kevin Love had just emerged as one of the league's best rebounders, but the Timberwolves still lacked another dynamic scorer. That's why Williams made sense. Williams offered athleticism, transition scoring, and a different dimension offensively that their roster simply didn't have. Instead, his position became harder to define once he reached the NBA. Playing alongside Love often pushed him to play small forward, where he looked less comfortable. When he played power forward, he sometimes struggled defensively against bigger players. He never found one consistent role. But it wasn't all his fault. His confidence seemed to rise and fall, and you can't put that on him. With changing coaches, it was a carousel, changing rotations, and changing expectations. The organization was not run very well. That doesn't mean scouts were wrong about his talent. It means translating talent into NBA success is often more complicated than identifying it. Now, let's talk about Enes Kanter. Kanter entered the draft under unusual circumstances. He committed to Kentucky but never played a college game after the NCAA ruled him ineligible because of benefits he had received while playing professionally in Turkey. That meant scouts spent an entire year evaluating workouts, practices, international competition, and private sessions instead of actual college games. Normally, that creates uncertainty. With Kanter, teams still felt comfortable. His offensive skill level stood out immediately. He had outstanding hands, advanced footwork, excellent balance. He established deep post position early, finished with either hand, had a drop step, and understood how to use angles instead of relying only on athleticism. For a teenager, his offensive game looked remarkably polished. He also played with relentless effort on the offensive glass. Every missed shot felt like another scoring opportunity. Those traits led to comparisons with players like Al Jefferson because of the footwork and interior scoring, while others mentioned Zach Randolph for his rebounding instincts, strength, and touch around the basket. The concerns were also well understood. He wasn't an explosive rim protector. His lateral movement raised questions. Defending pick and roll actions and quicker players wasn't expected to be a strength. But context matters. This was 2011. Traditional centers still carried tremendous value. Roy Hibbert had become one of the league's premier defensive anchors. Andrew Bynum was an all NBA center. Marc Gasol was establishing himself as one of basketball's best big men. A polished low post scorer still projected as a player you could build around. Utah had recently traded Darren Williams and was entering a rebuilding phase. Adding one of the draft's most skilled offensive big men made complete sense. To Kanter's credit, much of what scouts liked offensively actually translated. He became a productive scorer, one of the league's best offensive rebounders, and carved out a long NBA career because of those strengths. The problem was that the NBA changed faster than almost anyone expected. Spacing increased, switching became more important. Centers were expected to protect the rim while also defending on the perimeter. Those demands exposed the weaknesses that had already appeared in his scouting report. Looking back, it's tempting to ask why Minnesota didn't draft Kawhi Leonard or why Utah passed on Klay Thompson or Jimmy Butler, but that's using information teams didn't have in June of 2011. Kawhi was viewed as an elite defender with major offensive questions. Clay was considered one of the best shooters in the class, but few imagined he would become one of the greatest shooters the game had ever seen. Jimmy Butler wasn't even projected as a lottery pick. Every draft is a projection. Sometimes those projections become all-stars, sometimes they don't. Derrick Williams wasn't drafted second because one tournament game fooled everyone. He was drafted because he was an elite athlete, one of the most efficient players in college basketball, and a versatile scorer whose upside was easy to envision. Enes Kanter wasn't drafted third because teams ignored his weaknesses. He was drafted because polished offensive centers with his touch, footwork, and rebounding rarely came along. He was drafted because polished offensive centers with his touch, footwork, and rebounding rarely came along. Neither became the player their franchises hoped for, but both earned their place near the top of the draft. That's why it's important to judge these selections through the eyes of 2011, not through the results we know today.